The meeting of the Public Safety Committee is now called back to order. Thank you. We'll first have some comments from Alderman Vaccaro, who's not had the opportunity to speak.
First, I do actually want to thank Terry, and I think he's done a good job of working on the bill. I do have a lot of concerns that if we pass a bill, and I know we're going to have a lot of amendments, if we pass something that has subpoena power, it's been in the paper that it's just going to get vetoed, and it'll, in a sense, kill the bill. I also caution that if we do a lot of stuff that goes against what the association or what the attorneys have said, it's just going to be in court for the next couple of years. I still think, although I'm sure we're going to do a lot of amendments today, but I really think that there's been a lot of hard work put in this bill. I think that it seems that overall everybody seems to be wanting to move forward, but I do caution that moving forward with a bill that is just going to be in court or vetoed is the same as not having a bill at all. So that's my comments, and that's just where I'm at on it. But thank you.
Thank you. You want to make some comments? Okay. We'll now have comments by the sponsor, Alderman French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate both you and members of the committee sitting through 3 committee hearings. We've actually devoted many hours of hearings to this bill, and I think it's important because it is an important bill, and so we should give it all due diligence. And we've heard, I think, from everybody and every different party that could be affected by this, so I think that's a good thing. No one can say that we haven't done a thorough investigation. So I've got a few amendments to propose individually instead of a committee substitute. And I'll start with 2 that I think are really simple amendments that we all probably can agree to. They really were more almost Scribner's errors in the bill. But a few of them, as we talked about at the last committee hearing, there are a few sections in current version of 208 that refers to complaints, we would assume, against police officers, and it states by police officers or something to that effect. So those are 2 minor ones, and then we can possibly get into some more meaty ones, but let's just talk about the easy ones first.
This is one here.
Separate? No, that's let me go grab her.
Okay, go get it. He went to get the copies. He thought he had them on his desk, but he left the copies on the other side. So as soon as he gets them in return, we'll pick it back up.
Copies, I'll give them everything. There.
Okay, that'll be. Schmidt.
Like amendment sheet. Thank you.
Do we take a break or anything?
We just waiting on you?
Okay. All right, Mr. I do.
That's the first one?
All right, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for that. The secretary had stapled them all together, and we had to separate them.
If you can hold till we get them all out there.
Let's bring two in here, the one, Antonio.
You got the other?
Mhm.
Right on
Thank you.
there. I'm sure you got it. Okay. Not enough of them?
They're bringing more. Clerk, they're bringing more.
I could share with Tamika.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay. All right. That is number 2. Okay. So we have amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This is a simple one. Page 2, line 2 of the current version, as we discussed at the previous hearing, currently says that participation by members of the public in the process of receiving and reviewing civilian complaints by law enforcement officers. I think we all assume that these would be complaints against law enforcement officers, that it wouldn't actually be the law enforcement officers who are making the complaints. So I think that was a pretty simple one.
Or, I'm sorry, are we on the original bill?
The original bill.
Everything's off the original bill. There is no committee substitute.
Page 2, last.
Page 2, line 2.
Page 2, line 2. Currently, it says complaints by law enforcement officers. We can assume it should be complaints against law enforcement officers.
No, you're correct. Page 2, line 2. I got it. You got it? Page 2, line 2. Yeah.
Wait a
And
minute,
again,
maybe it's
we're all going off the original bill. There is no committee substitute. There we go.
no, I was.
Well, that's the one that's, right.
I'm good now.
Got it.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory if there's any questions.
Are we following amendment number 1? Begins page 2, line 2. Any? You found it? They're still trying to find it down there. Are we all, you found it?
I don't have that version.
No, it's the original version.
Yeah.
On your desk.
There's no committee sub before, so the original version of the bill.
Yes, I just got one now.
Page 2, line 2. Okay.
You know, I know the amendments to everybody in the crowd now. Just making sure.
Okay. You see it? Page
Yes,
2, line 2.
I got it.
Okay, it's just deleting by and inserting against. Okay. We can take a motion on this amendment. Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 1. Any discussion on the motion? Not, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Bosley, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Gracia.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
9 aye votes, 0 no votes. Amendment number 1 passes.
Okay, by your vote, we've adopted amendment number 1. Amendment number 2,
Begins page 3, line 17.
is that, we don't have it out in front of everybody? Where did, I think these are them here. Begins on page who? Yeah. This is 2.
Line 17.
They don't have to. You have a copy? Yeah, amendment 2 here.
All right, I think everyone has one.
Yes, we all.
So this is also a very similar amendment. If everyone looked at page 3, line 17, under the definition of complaint, currently the bill states that a complaint shall mean any request directed to IAD or the COB to inspect and investigate alleged misconduct against members of the police department. And I think all of us intend it to be by members of the police department, misconduct by, as opposed to misconduct against.
Right.
So it's, again, one of those, almost a Scrivener's error, but
Any questions? If not, we can entertain a motion.
So moved.
Been moved and we have a second. Been moved.
I'm sorry.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 2. There's been there's objection to previous roll. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Clerk, would you call the
Alderman
roll?
Bosley. Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Carter.
Aye.
Alderwoman Gracia.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Arnowitz. 10 aye votes, 0 no votes. Amendment number 2 comes out with a due pass recommendation.
Okay, by your vote, we've adopted amendment number 2. You have a copy of it? Okay, all right.
And we have another,
Then the sponsor has amendment number 3.
Page 11.
page 11, line 8.
Okay. Copies are coming around.
Coming. And this does, all right, and this is the last of the simple ones. This one simply adds under this section on page 11 that establishes the rules that the COB establishes to for their procedures and for receiving complaints. It just adds language that these rules and procedures shall be available to the public and members of the police department. Again, I think that one's pretty not controversial. It just states that whatever rules they do adopt for receiving complaints, those rules should be made available to both the public and members of the police department, so everybody knows the rules.
Okay. Questions? If not, we can entertain a motion for amendment 3.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Alderman, the 21st Ward, read that again, how it's supposed to read, and duties and responsibilities then. Oh, I missed that, got it.
Got it?
I got
Okay.
it, thanks.
All right. Okay, we can entertain a motion for amendment 3.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 3. There's been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, we've adopted amendment number 3.
to
This is 4.
4, Amendment 4, dealing with page 10, line 16.
It's not before everybody yet, huh? Page 10.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Sure, get in there.
All right, I think everyone has a copy of the proposed amendment in front of them. This would be Amendment 4. If there was a scale of controversy, I think the first 3 amendments were maybe on 1 on a scale of 10, and this might be 2 or 3. But it simply says that if the ultimate result of any COB investigation is that they just make a recommendation to the chief of police or the public safety director, the current reading of the bill states that the COB may request that the director of public safety provide information to the COB concerning whether the COB's recommendations were implemented, meaning they can ask, but the director doesn't necessarily have to give them any information about whether he or she followed their recommendations. I propose changing that to shall, instead of basically rewriting it to the director of public safety shall provide information to the COB concerning whether the COB's recommendations were implemented. So I propose that there is a requirement that the public safety director at least get back to them and let them know if he took their advice or didn't.
Okay, questions?
Yeah, I do.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, Alderman. So what you're saying is, once IAD's done with their investigation, Civilian Review Board does their, makes their recommendation, you just want to make sure that the Director of Public Service checks
Thank you.
back with them to make sure all their concerns were requested or whatever.
Well, not even that, just, so if they just give the public safety director and the chief a report and saying this is what we recommend,
Right.
that it doesn't just go in a trash can, at the very least, the chief has to, or the public safety director has to write back,
And
thank
let
you,
them know.
we took it under consideration, but we decided not to do it.
Thank you.
Alderman Vaccaro?
I mean, so does that become public after that, or does that just stay between them? So I guess I'm concerned that if, does he publish what his recommendation was?
So the Civilian Oversight Board would make the recommendation. All this would ask is that that the public safety director gets back to them about what he did with the recommendation.
And what do they do with the information? Let's just say they got back and he said, well, we appreciate that you thought about that, but we decided we're just not going to do a thing. Does that, then where does it go?
That's it. That's just it. So, I mean, at the very least, though, then we'll be able to, have a good idea of how many of the recommendations are well upon or nothing happened. But it's important at least to have that information. It doesn't require them to do anything, and we still don't require them to follow the recommendation. Just let me know what you did. Did you do nothing or
Okay,
not like the recommendation?
okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, we can entertain a motion for Amendment 4.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt Amendment number 4. Been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, we have adopted Amendment number 4.
All right. Okay. My last one? You want to do that? That was my last one.
Let's hold off on that. You want to go with, you have seniority, we can go with yours. Okay, Alderman Ingrassia? Which one you want first?
I don't know, I mean, what is that?
This would be number 5.
We're on page 12, line 3.
It's not before all of us yet, so.
What page?
Page 12, line 3.
12?
Page 12, yeah. Are you going to do the age from 18?
Yes, I can, no problem. Page number 5. Let's see what she wants to do. Page 12, line 3.
This would strike out the Citizens Academy requirement within the first year of service and replace it with training prior to considering or hearing their first case.
That's one of mine, too.
Page 12, line 3. Within the first year of service. Okay. Would you just say that again? Some of us
Sure.
were-
So it replaces the training requirement within the first year of service to prior to considering or hearing their first case, they would be required to attend the Citizens Academy.
Okay. Any questions on the amendment?
I just
Alderman
wanna make sure-
Vaccaro?
Just want to make sure what I'm voting on. So this means that after someone would get nominated to this, they have to they have to pass or go through the training before they hear the first case, and otherwise they can't be considered, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, Alderman.
Just for clarification, how long is the Citizens Academy course?
12 weeks.
12 weeks.
12 weeks, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? 12 weeks, 1 night a week. You've gone through it?
Yes, graduated.
We have a graduate of the academy, that's why he knows so much intimate information about it. Okay, then, any questions on this amendment? If not, we can entertain a motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 5. There's been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, we've adopted amendment number 5. Amendments, you have another amendment? Okay.
Convictions.
Well, good.
Page 6, line 5. This is number 6.
Yep. This is page 6, line 5.
Okay, we all have it in front of us now.
Okay, so this would add to the end of section F, any conviction within the last 10 years for a misdemeanor, which includes sexual assault, domestic violence, or an assault directed at a police officer, shall also be grounds for disqualification.
Do we need that repeated? Okay. Any questions or discussion? Alderman Carter, and then Alderman French.
How did you come up with 10 years?
That is what the federal government uses when they're looking at offenses, a 10-year mark for a clean record.
Okay. All right, thanks. No further questions.
Alderman French, you had something?
So I would caution against
Right.
adding additional restrictions. I think most of this will be worked out during the confirmation hearing, and it's very unlikely that during a confirmation hearing that anybody with any kind of a sexual assault or, I don't think the mayor would put that person up. And unless we're adding additional powers to the board, I would caution against adding restrictions who could serve on the board. Again, I think that all works out in the nomination and the confirmation process.
It might, but it would also possibly preclude somebody who had one of these offenses at a later, 20 years ago or 30 years ago from becoming part of the board, and this would protect against that happening.
I don't read it that way. A misdemeanor, currently, a misdemeanor can't keep you off the board. And so again, if that was an issue, if it was a serious offense, especially one with, like striking or assaulting a police officer, I think that will come out during the confirmation here. And I doubt the mayor would put that person up.
Well, saying think and you doubt doesn't really provide an actual answer.
Well, let me put it this way. There are no such restrictions for members of this board or this body who do have subpoena power and have far more authority than this body, this proposed body. So again, I think that, and because we don't have those added restrictions of this board, that all works out through the election process and the re-election process. So likewise, I think anybody who doesn't, meet the moral or criminal or ethical standards, that will all work itself out in the nomination and confirmation hearings.
Any other comments?
I did want to mention that I appreciated that this is not in perpetuity, that you put the 10 years. I think these kind of things should be considered during the process. I'm not altogether sure that it should be should prohibit one though from serving on it.
What? I'm sorry.
Prohibit one, disqualify one from serving on it. I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
Alderman Vaccaro?
I actually think the amendment,
I didn't hear what you
oh,
said.
I'm sorry, I would think the amendment would be good in the sense that if I knew that I had that, I most likely wouldn't even bother to apply. So it may cut off people that have these kind of convictions, to say, gee, you know what, I would do this, but I know that I couldn't be considered. It might actually help in the process of finding a fair board.
Any other comments? Alderwoman Hubbard?
I would just like to know, how do we determine these specific offenses? I mean, it states sexual assault, domestic violence, or assault directed at a police officer, and it's saying that even if these were misdemeanors, they still would disqualify a person. And where did the 10-year threshold come from?
The, most of the language came from the suggestions from the SLPOA just this morning, and I added the 10 years because I didn't think in perpetuity was fair.
Okay, I think I would agree with the alderman from the 21st to assume that these type of things will be worked out during the process. No more questions.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, we can entertain a motion for Amendment 6.
I'll make the motion that we pass Amendment 6.
Is there a second for? Well, it's been moved and seconded. Onwards. Moved and seconded that we adopt Amendment number 6. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Boswell. Alderman Schmidt.
No.
Alderman Boyd.
Pass.
Vice Chairman French.
No.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
No.
Alderman Carter.
No.
Alderman Ingracia.
Aye.
Alderman Green.
No.
Chairman Kennedy.
No?
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Four aye votes, 6 no votes. Amendment number 6 fails.
Okay. By your vote, we have failed to sustain the motion to adopt Amendment number 6. Is there another amendment? Alderwoman?
One more.
Okay. I was trying to give it to seniority. Any members of the board? But later on, yeah.
Thank you, David.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, I forgot to make.
Okay, we all have it before us. You can
Okay,
explain.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are on page 9, line 18. I think I wrote that backwards on the amendment. I apologize.
It's not page 9?
Yeah, it's page 9.
Is it? Okay, hold on.
Page 9, 18, line 18?
It's written backwards.
So this would add a section
Oh.
after Section 10. It was one of the proposed changes that the Alderman from the 21st made, that all members of the COB shall follow core competencies for civilian oversight practitioners and the Code of Ethics of the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement.
So is this, it's supposed to be page 18? We have, this is correct on here.
It's correct.
Okay, all right. It's page 9.
Line
No.
18. I apologize.
Let me repeat that, just so everyone's on the same page. The amendment for Amendment 7 is page 9, line 18. We would be inserting the additional section, which is
Oh,
before us.
I
So,
got you. I got you.
creating a section.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got you. I think you might want to review that again. Some of us were trying to
Okay.
figure out what.
Sure, so this just adds a section after Section 10.
Mm-hmm.
All members of the COB shall follow the core competencies for civilian oversight practitioners and the Code of Ethics of the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee or comments? Alderwoman Hubbard?
Does anyone, I mean, I think it's good to have it, but does anyone have a copy of it to see what those actual standards are? Has anybody seen it?
I've got it
It's
online.
like the House of Representative rules.
Is that much?
Yeah.
A
Yeah,
number
you would
of-
like to see a copy of that before making that decision.
Have you seen it?
I've seen it before. I don't, it's not in my mind. I couldn't tell you what it said. But I can, you know, if you ask me if I've seen it, yes.
No further questions.
Right, so there are a number of guidelines that they provide, which quite a few COBs or throughout the country have adopted. I think it just provides a level of professionalism to, you know, the requirements for the Code of Ethics that these practitioners will be following.
Is this something that you can get a copy of for us to see before we vote on this amendment? And maybe we can take up some of the other ones?
Absolutely.
And come back to this?
Yep.
If that'll make us feel more comfortable. Alderman?
Yeah, in addition to that, I remember the Code of Ethics of the National Association for Civilian Oversight, but what are the core competencies? That's an addition. So what are those?
Do you want me to get a copy of it?
Is that,
Yeah.
does that exist? So there's a
I can
document,
make it up, yeah, it definitely
there's a
exists.
document called Core Competencies for Civilian Oversight
Yes.
Practitioners. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And if I can.
Alderman French?
I would be interested in seeing that too. So the Code of Ethics of the National Association of Civilian Oversight, I included that in what we discussed at the last meeting. So I'm kind of familiar with that. A Code of Ethics is one thing. The other part, though, the shall follow the core competencies of the civilian oversight. I would really like to see that, and then that could inform my opinion a little bit more. But following a code of ethics is one thing. Following the core competencies. So if this core competency suggests a education background or age limit, would that mean that we'd have to follow that?
It doesn't.
Okay, so yeah, it would all be cleared up if I could read it.
Okay. So that takes us back to, if you can get copies, and we'll just hold on amendment number 7 and then go to some other amendments while you get copies of it. Alderman Schmidt had some amendments.
Yes, we have some.
You ready? This would be Amendment 8.
One at a
Yeah,
time.
right,
So
right,
you-
right. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Remember, Dave was the guy. He's yelling at everybody.
He needs one.
Can you guys share again?
Okay.
We're short a copy.
No problem.
Great,
Wait a
thank
minute,
you.
is this one?
I don't
This
know.
one right here? Oh, I have it. I have it. What is the number?
Number 8. Okay, I believe we all have Amendment number 8 in front of us. Alderman Schmidt?
Yes, so on page 9, beginning at line 2, when Mr. Brunschreger was here, talked about removal of folks for misconduct. And so after consecutive terms, on line 2, it would then say, any member of the COB shall be removed for misconduct arising from the violation of any of the rules regarding the Sunshine Law, privacy rights, and the handling of records as outlined in this ordinance in accordance with COB procedures adopted pursuant to Section 4, Paragraph 7 of this ordinance. And there's a provision within Section 4, Paragraph 7 for the adoption of procedures by the COB.
Okay. Questions from members of the committee? Alderwoman Hubbard?
If they weren't removed for any form of misconduct, like if we didn't add this, what would be the normal process of them removing someone from the board?
There is none unless they adopt it, and so we're directing that they adopt as one of their procedures the handling of misconduct and how you eliminate someone.
So could they, I mean, if we didn't put this in, could they just, as a body, come up with some means of removing someone on their own, or?
They could, but they might not, and this directs them to do so.
Okay, no question.
Other questions from members of the committee? Other comments? Okay, then. We can entertain a motion for Amendment number 8.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt Amendment number 8. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, if not, we can, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Carter.
Aye.
Alderman Gracia.
Aye.
Alderman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
10 aye votes, 0 no votes. Amendment number 8 comes out with a due pass recommendation.
Okay, we've adopted Amendment number 8. There's another, now coming before us is Amendment number 9.
I've got one.
And you know it's not to the committee, so it's just to people that. I was wondering where you were.
Page 10.
This is Amendment number 9.
Yep. This is Amendment 9.
Amendment 9. Everyone has a copy? Okay, Alderman Schmidt?
Okay, so on page 10, line 9, and I know that this is very short in terms of the amendment, but as you may recall, Mr. Brunschreger talked about the law establishing civilian review boards, and it does say that there cannot be a finding upon an unsworn complaint or statement. It doesn't say that it has to be sworn in advance. And he didn't say anything about affirmation. but some people for religious reasons will affirm as opposed to swear. So this would put in after upon and unsigned, it would add unsworn, unaffirmed, and then it continues on, or anonymous complaint or statement. So no finding shall be based solely upon an unsigned, unsworn, unaffirmed, or anonymous complaint or statement. So that would not require it to be affirmed or sworn in advance, but it would require that it be sworn or affirmed in accordance with state law prior to any findings.
Okay, comments from the committee. Alderman French? Yes, sir?
I don't have a problem with that. As you mentioned, the state law does say that no findings shall be based solely on unsworn. And then with the, I think the word solely too
Right.
is enough protection, because they can still do it based upon evidence of their investigation or even IAD's investigation, but not solely upon just a sworn statement or even an unsworn statement. So
Correct.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, if not, we can entertain a motion for amendment number 9.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. The adoption of amendment number 9, there's been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, we've adopted amendment number 9. Now coming before us is amendment number 10.
If we had had a longer lunch, I might have gotten more done.
That's why we kept it to those just 20 minutes.
We should have went for 5.
I've emailed 3 secretaries, so hopefully somebody got it.
Page 11, line 4. Page 11. Sure. Gotcha. Okay, it's before us, Alderman Schmidt.
Okay, so on page 11, line 4, it would strike out the word may after the COB and insert the word shall. And so that would be that the COB shall, by majority vote and after consultation with the Director of Public Safety, adopt rules and procedures. This also refers back to our amendment number 8 that talks about removal of folks for misconduct. So rather than saying that they may adopt, this indicates that they shall adopt rules and procedures. Rather than us having an ordinance or other things that kind of direct them specifically what to do, they should adopt their own rules. And this would require them to do so.
Any questions or comments from members of the committee on amendment number 10?
You know,
Alderman French?
Yeah, and I'm good with that one too. I think that also goes back to our previous amendment. I don't know if it was
Right, number 8.
Well, also number 3,
Okay.
that then says that those rules must be made public.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay. There's no other discussion. We can entertain a motion for amendment number 10.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 10. There's been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, we've adopted amendment number 10. That complete you?
One more.
One more from,
And this is the one from a constituent specifically.
this is, will be amendment number 11.
I got one from my constituents too. For real, she was new that. That's a peanut butter.
Page 14. Okay, Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. So on page 14, line 4 to page 14, line 6, on the racial profiling data, my constituent is looking for all profiling data, so it would remove racial and indicate profiling data The COB shall review all relevant profiling data. Relevant profiling, and then also he's interested in pedestrian stops and vehicle stops as part of that on the profiling. So it would say review all relevant profiling, pedestrian stops, and vehicle stops data and statistics compiled by government and private entities, and shall use it to help determine if the police department or its employees appear to engage in profiling.
Okay, questions from members of the committee? Alderman Carter, you had something?
No, sir. No,
Okay.
no questions.
Alderman French.
Actually, let me reread this thing first.
Sure.
Okay, give me a moment.
It is more inclusive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It would not exclude racial profiling. Obviously, that would be a part of it. And there is profiling that is not considered inappropriate.
Okay, so I understand the amendment here. So in line 4, okay, first, just as a technical thing.
Sure.
So in line 4 of page 14, the word racial is actually used twice.
Correct.
So you're saying the first use of the word racial?
All uses of racial.
Okay, so we're gonna scratch all that.
Right.
But then it says, insert in lieu thereof.
Right.
These words. So where would you insert those words?
From lines 4 through lines 6 on page 14.
So I guess Clerk, can you help me out here? I think, is the amendment formatted properly? Because,
Breaking out that line, the word racial, and you're replacing it with the word profile, all of that language.
yeah, I don't think that makes sense. So if you're, first I think you need to be specific in which racial you're taking out. And,
All of them.
but you can't replace it all with that language, though. But it sounds like what you want to do is cross out the two uses of.
You're changing,
Go ahead.
hold on. The way I would interpret this is, rather than saying racial profiling data, it would say profiling data. And then that whole section there is being replaced with the section written as such.
Right, so yeah.
Because the other piece that
That's what he's
he's-
doing. I mean, I'm not saying right.
The formatting of the amendment, though, I think is, all right, so I'm taking that whole section out, and instead I'm saying that. So profiling data, the COB may review all relevant profiling, pedestrian stops, and vehicle stops,
All of that. Right.
Okay. Sure, we can say that.
data
too
and
long.
statistical compiling. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just think we need the formatting of the amendment. So you just want to strike out that whole section and put a new section?
Well, it retains, however, Alderman, it retains the COB may, by majority vote of its members at a meeting when a quorum is present, recommend policy, operational, or procedural changes as it deems appropriate. That remains.
Okay, so the first sentence you want to
Yes.
replace?
Yep.
Okay.
Because what he's doing is getting out just racial profiling, putting in all profiling, and being more specific about also adding pedestrian stops and vehicle stops.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's different than what I said. Not taking out that whole section. You're leaving that last sentence.
I am,
So he's just taking out that first sentence.
correct.
Thank you. Yep,
It was too long.
thank you.
Okay.
2 words.
I don't know, if you tell me, do we need to reformat the amendment to do that?
You can call that as, we don't have to. I mean, we all agree. But if you have that right as an alderman to rewrite it, to request that.
I don't want to be an
Proper
asshole.
format. Pardon?
I don't want to be an a-hole, but, okay. No, I get the point, though. All right, as long as I'm clear and the clerk is clear on what we're doing.
I'll repeat it.
Everybody else clear?
I have a question.
So it
Okay.
looks like we're striking the first sentence
Replacing it
With this.
and replacing it with that sentence.
Mhm.
Okay.
and the last sentence in that section 12 will remain.
Last sentence will remain.
Right.
Okay.
Alderwoman Hubbard?
So basically, you're just doing it to include all kind of profiling, like the person's sexuality or whatever.
Whatever it is.
And so when we asked about that earlier, and he mentioned that racial profiling wasn't in the statute, is there any information in the statute in regards to any form of profiling or just?
Yeah, I did not see anything in the statute that specifically referred to that. I know that we're having the COB also look at data in terms of setting forth potential changes to procedure, operations, policy. So, I mean, you're correct in your assessment that if we can't look at racial profiling, we can't look at profiling at all. But apparently, according to what I gathered from the chair earlier today, and we haven't had testimony from the city councilor who is here, but it was my understanding that there was not a problem with basing recommendations on operations or procedures or policy on these data. In that case, it was racial profiling data. This would simply just expand that to all profiling data and would also be specific about allowing them. It doesn't require, well, it does require them to. You know, I also said may instead of shall, so it doesn't require them to do it, but allows them to do it.
Okay.
Did that complete your question? Any other questions or comments from members of the committee on amendment number 11? Okay, if not, we can take a motion for amendment number 11.
So moved.
Been moved. Been moved and seconded for the adoption of amendment number 11. The request for previous rule?
Objection.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Bosley. Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Carter.
Aye.
Alderman Gracia.
No.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
9 aye votes, 1 no vote. Amendment number 11 comes out with a do pass recommendation.
By your vote, we've adopted amendment number 11. Does that complete you?
Yes,
Alderman?
it
Okay.
does, thankfully.
Alderwoman Green, did you have any?
Yes.
At this point? We're still waiting to get some more information for, it was two pieces.
Okay, I think we need to do them in reverse order, because we don't need to amend that unless we decide to do this. But this needs to go with it. Yes.
That's the thing.
This is page 8, line 15.
Okay.
This is just explains the change.
Okay, so this is on page 8, line 15.
I don't think we all have it yet.
Not yet.
As soon as it's before everyone.
Is this yours?
Yes.
This is just the You can share, or just take Arnowitz's. Thanks.
Yeah, what we have is the amendment language and an example of the rubric. So Alderwoman Green.
So, last Thursday, this is the exact same amendment that that I presented and talked about then, but I know that there were some questions about what a rubric is, how a rubric could be used. So, what I did was create a sample of what a rubric could look like. So I know that the concerns we had before was, are we excluding people? Are we making it more difficult for people to apply? And I don't think that this does that. I think it just standardizes the way that we make our appointments so that it's not seen as a political process, but that people are actually, meeting certain standards with regard to community involvement or having an understanding of fairness or an understanding of accountability, that they have the time to dedicate to the positions, things that have already been outlined in the bill as things that we're looking for in that selection process, but it's just holding us more accountable as aldermen to make sure that we are using those mechanisms to make our decisions, and that then the mayor is using those mechanisms to make appointments based upon people who really are meeting the skill sets that we have already defined that we want to see of people on the Citizen Oversight Board. So basically, it just outlines what the confirmation process would be. There's not a whole lot of change to it from previously. The difference is that we're, as aldermen, using a standardized mechanism to decide who we are going to send to the mayor, to then also use a standardized process to review those applications, and that the applications of the people who are chosen will become public. Afterwards, people will be able to see what our thought process was and making those decisions, see how we rated people, so that there's a level of transparency to the decision-making process that we're going through to bring people onto the Citizen Oversight Board. And I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Okay. Questions from members of the committee? Yes, sir. Alderman Carter? No questions at this point?
Can we just have?
Yeah, well, give us a
They just
moment
read
too.
it, 'cause I'm
Yes, sir.
trying to
I know.
digest.
I recognize that we're still
Give
reading.
you a minute.
You do? Alderman French?
Yeah, if I can. So I think I understand what you're trying to do. And I don't disagree with the intent. Do you think, though, so for most appointments, any board that we have currently that's appointed, it's usually just up to the mayor to appoint. And on this one, we've added an entire extra layer of the whole nomination and public hearing, nomination hearings, even the districts and aldermen working together in groups of 4 to come up with nominees. So in that way, I think this one already goes above and beyond. I would worry of unintended consequences, even of trying to, of further complicating that. And then I also remind you too, is that at the end of the day, as we talked about, even after we go through our own nomination procedure, the mayor can still appoint who he wants to appoint. Does this change that?
It will require that the mayor also is making public his decision-making process, much in the way that we are. So his rating of the people that he chooses to appoint will be made public as well. I just believe that when there's a layer of public accountability, when you have to justify your choices, hopefully you're more inclined to pick people who are in the best interest of the community and not just as a political appointment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with that. Okay, that's all I had.
Alderman Boyd?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly applaud the Alderwoman from the 15th Ward and in her thought process about this, but I just have a few concerns. So the rubric shall be open to the public. So it's your intent that through this scoring process, that everyone who was interviewed, it would show their scoring process?
No. What that means is that the rubric is made available to anybody who is applying, so they know under what, they know the qualifications or the characteristics that they're being evaluated on when they submit their application.
Okay, so who would the rubric be made public to?
Anybody who is applying.
I mean, no, I'm saying after the scoring or selection process. So let's suppose that I'm applying, using the rubrics, who has access to it?
You mean after the scores have been created?
Who's scoring, and so who are the people doing the scoring, and who all has access to it?
So we're the people who are doing the scoring. So as we get applications that come to us, we will evaluate those applications in a standardized way. And then from that, determine the ones who meet our qualifications, have the highest scores on that rubric, and those are the ones that we'll send to the mayor, who will then use that same process.
So you're saying the Public Safety Committee?
The alderman for each district, because the way it's currently set up is, 4 aldermen per district can give recommendations to the mayor's office. So that part of it doesn't change. What just changes is that we're letting people know ahead of time what the expectations are that we're looking for when they fill out the application by giving them the rubric, because the rubric just outlines what the expectations are, how it is that you score the highest possible in your application process.
Okay, who's the examinee, I guess? Maybe I'm not being clear. So who's interviewing so I have this rubric, and tell me the process. How are we walking through it? So the person applies, then what? Okay,
so a person applies. They give us their application, they give us their 3 letters of recommendation, 2 of which need to be from either community organizations within the district that they're representing or community members within the district that they're looking to represent. We get those.
Who is we?
We is the districts, the 4 aldermen of each district. We get the applications.
Okay.
Then we look at those applications, we evaluate them based upon a predetermined rubric, and we send, however many we think meet the highest scores over to the mayor's office. And then the mayor goes through that same process and evaluates the applications based upon a standardized application process. And then and then once he makes his decision, he gives them back to the board to approve. And then, which is the same process was already written in here. The only difference is we're standardizing it. So everybody in every district will use the same process. And then at the end, anybody who is selected to be on the Citizen Oversight Board, their application will be made public so that the public can see the decision-making process that us as aldermen in the districts and the mayor went through in making our recommendations.
Okay, here's an unintended consequence that I see with doing something like this. So Alderman French, Alderman Carter, myself, and Alderman Schmidt are in the same group. Each one of us want our person to be that person, okay? And so what are the chances that I will score Alderman Carter's person less competent than my person and stop, it's going to be a political game unless you only had one person, and the group just kind of agree on that one person. I see an unintended consequence of us competing against each other in an unfair way.
And that's the purpose of having a rubric, because if, say, you want to score Alderman Carter's nominee poor, and so you give them a 1 for community involvement and community support, but they submitted 5 letters of community support, you can't then give them a bad score in that area, because because the rubric says that if you
I don't
meet that
trust
qualification.
But I don't trust who gave the letters of support on behalf of that person. I mean, it could have came from anybody.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Okay, so
that.
Alderman Carter gives these raving reviews from ministers and community leaders in his community. They write all this great stuff about this person, but I generally think that person is not a great person. So I'm going to give them a 1. You can't make me give them a 4 because of those recommendations. May not know those people.
You may not know them, but it standardizes the process.
Okay, and I don't want to be disrespectful, and I don't want to be belittling to anybody, because I think this is an excellent tool in the educational arena where you have educators evaluating whether somebody will be a good fit for their organization. But at the end of the day, the reality is this is politics. And attitudes and egos are going to get in the way, I guarantee you, to the point where it's not going to be very helpful. I think that is the unintended consequence of this.
And I think that's where we are already, and that the way to, what we heard a lot of in the testimony is that people don't trust us just as much as they don't trust the mayor's office. They don't trust us to not make political decisions. So if we can do something that makes our process more transparent, to give people in the public more trust that we are not just putting somebody out there because they happen to be somebody we like, but rather because they're actually qualified, I think that's going to go a long way to also building trust between government and the community. I mean, we don't typically do decision-making this way, but when you look at most, whether it be nonprofit, for-profit organizations, they pick people because they are qualified, because they meet certain criteria that they're looking for. And it doesn't just have to be education, it can be life experiences, it can be a variety of different factors, but you want people who are going to do the best job, not just because it's somebody you like or another alderman likes.
Okay, at the end of the day, the electoral process, I hate to say it, it's not about who's best qualified. When the voters go to vote for their alderman, it's not always who's best qualified, it's who they happen to like best, for whatever reason. Oftentimes, people get elected to office and you shake your head and you go, how in the world did that happen? Because it was based on their personality and who they knew. It had nothing to do with qualifications, because some people would argue every elected official from the mayor on down in citywide county offices could have a problem with their competencies. And it's politics, and just me. It's just Jeffrey Boyd. I don't see it working. I like the idea, I certainly do. I think it's thinking outside the norm, but I'm just concerned that it doesn't fit well within the political system. Thanks.
Other questions? Alderman Hubbard, did you have something? Alderwoman Hubbard, then Carter.
I have a few comments. I applaud you for trying to do something that, we don't normally do. But my concern would be basically trying to disempower somebody in their appointing ability. I think that it's good the way that it's structured, where 4 people will have to, throw some names in the hat and decide who will get it. But if you go back to just the rubric in itself, who's to say that because you have 10 letters of recommendation that weighs more than you having a law enforcement background? And when you start deciding on that, it'll come down to whatever the majority says. But I mean, even in our own system, like we went through some stuff with CDA, and when they changed everything and was scoring people, and a lot of people were disproportionately affected by that, and a lot of small organizations didn't get funding because that whole process was unclear. So although I understand your intent, I just don't think it would work in this system, because like I said, when you create the rubric and you say, well, you get 10 points for this or 5 points for that or 8 points for that, that can be deemed as skewed from the onset of it.
Right. So in what is currently presented, every competency has the same weight to it. It also says that it is up to the public safety, what do we say, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, as well as the Department of Public Safety to figure out exactly what this rubric is going to look like in the end.
But
The
that person is
sample,
appointed by the mayor as well, so, I mean,
right, there's still going to be, I mean, you can't take politics out of politics. What you can do is make it more transparent, and that's what this is seeking to do. It's making us justify our decisions, and, you know, on here, you know, just going through both, you know, the version that was presented by the Police Officers Association and the former version. I mean, I put criteria in here for looking at people's ability to be accountable to the community, their experience with law enforcement, their knowledge of policies and practices in law enforcement, so that we're looking at a variety of different indicators, and somebody might score really poorly in one area but score really well in another, and that leads to, you know, having diversity on the board. You know, I think that at some point in time we got to be ready to do something differently rather than just saying, you know, well, we've always done it this way, we've always just done political appointments, we've always just put people in places that we know of, and really let the community take ownership. And this is a process to give the community more ownership of who is on the Civilian Oversight Board.
well, basically, I mean, it would just put the information out there for them to see, but I mean, it doesn't directly involve them in the process, because like I said, if from the beginning, you know, you said everything is weighted equally, but I mean, just because some person has a 10-year law enforcement background, that doesn't mean they're in a position to be more fair than someone who doesn't. So I totally understand where you're going with it. You know, but I just wouldn't want to set a precedent to where we start this process in every appointed position, because that just, you know, debunks it. I mean, the city elected our mayor for a reason. You know, people have jumped through their hoops to get where they're at, and I don't think that we need to be chipping away at that every step of the way when we have, I think we did a good effort to say, okay, these are the districts. And normally it's just, okay, throw your name in the hat, and whoever has the most leverage with the mayor, you know, pushes their person. So to create these districts, and, you know, everybody has an equal say, and then once it gets to the top, then you know, it gets decided. I think that's a good effort.
I just think that, you know, the mayor and all of us elected officials are, the people we're accountable to is the people. It's the citizens of the city of St. Louis. And so the more that we can give power to the citizens of St. Louis to be involved in these decisions and appoint people who are qualified to positions and not just who have worked their way through a political system, I think that helps our city. And that's what I want to see done, you know, not just here, but in the long term. I want people who are qualified and that are going to, you know, really represent the city in the way that we need them to be represented. And you don't always get those people if they're just an appointment made by an alderman or an appointment made by the mayor.
I understand that, and to be perfectly honestly, I don't think that we're willy-nillying around with appointments, because clearly that's a reflection upon the person who made the appointment. So I guess maybe I have a little bit more faith in our system, but thank you for your efforts.
Alderman Schmidt? Oh, excuse me. I had to reckon Alderman Carter, then Alderman Schmidt.
No, I just wanted to make a point, and just so the way that the process goes within your amendment, so everybody, so what I see is that we're gonna basically get the same person out of each district, right? Because we're gonna get the most educated person with the most letters, with the most. What else we asking for? Yeah, we're gonna get the most educated person
I
with the
disagree
most
with
community
that.
support, and I thought that with this board we were trying to get a different variety of persons.
Right.
And so that's the thing. That's probably one of the most one of the main problems that I have. And also I think that the alderman from the 22nd Ward brought up a good point about the process. Like, what if I score his person low, or his person brings in some recommendation, some recommendation letters from folks who I don't think that are as important as folks, as other folks.
Right.
So.
Well,
that's
there's
a concern.
nothing that limits the number of people that you can give to the mayor to look at. So
Them 1,000 people.
right, I mean, you could, and under the current system, you could. I mean, this is just a way for us to look at those applications on a standardized way. And, like I said, this is a draft. This is not this was intended to give you an idea of what a rubric looks like, but you're not going to end up with the same person
So what's
in
the-
every district, because people are going to rate high in some areas, they're going to rate low in other areas. And I think, as we look at the rubric that, perhaps needs to be used at the mayoral level, it needs to take into consideration that diversity piece. We don't want to end up with, 5 attorneys that's just from one point of view. So, I think there also at that level needs to be something that says, these are the totality of skill sets that we're looking for, and finding people that fit those skill sets so that we do have an attorney, we do have somebody who is very familiar with police policies and practices. We do have somebody who has been very, involved throughout the St. Louis community, so that you have a broad representation of people from across the city.
Do you think that if regular citizens knew that we were scoring them on the rubric, that would disencourage them to come and try to get on the board?
I don't, and the reason I don't is, again, coming at this from a teaching background, we're letting people know what the expectations are that we're expecting in the beginning. So they're not just filling out an application, not knowing, what we're looking for from that application. They actually can look at this and say, okay, so, if I'm going to score high in community involvement, I need to talk about, the history I've had in my community when I fill out my application. They know that there are certain things that we're looking for that will help them do well on that application, and will help bring out those qualifications that we are looking for.
Right. So through this process, we could recommend as many people as we want. Like you
Correct.
said, 1,000.
There is no limit anywhere on the number of people, we can refer from the districts over to the mayor's office. There wasn't previously, there's not in this form. It just helps to bring transparency to that process.
Thank you. No further questions.
Alderman Schmidt?
First of all, Alderwoman, thank you for this. I appreciate, what it sounds like to me is almost like an RFQ, or request for qualifications or whatever, at least in terms of the rubric. So when we send out requests for proposals, or we send out a request for individuals, we do it on qualifications, and so there's some specific things that are being looked for. I think that slightly amends, or could amend, what we have listed in section 3, paragraph 2 for qualifications, because we left that pretty broad. So this would essentially, if you have a rubric or a set of qualifications, the consistency is good, but there may be some unintended consequences in terms of who would be viewed based on that rubric to be more qualified. I just point that out. On number 4, so, and you just indicated, and this was one of my questions, was I too do not see any limits. So in each one of these districts, we could send up 100 potential nominees to the mayor. I'm wondering who's going to, who on our staff, which doesn't exist, is going to do this. So as I understand it, at first, as I'm reading this on paragraph 4 of D, it says that it will include the number of persons applying for COB membership and aggregate data regarding the applicants broken down by age, race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, immigrant status, disability, and scores achieved on the qualifications rubric. But then it says that, at the last sentence, it says the names and scores of all recommended or nominated applicants shall be included in the report. So that kind of breaks out the scores, right, of anybody we send up to the mayor?
So the one, after the mayor, so,
Okay, so after it comes from the mayor down to the Board of Aldermen, and then they're nominated,
after they are nominated, then the scores become public.
I understand, but who's going to, do we have to, when we nominate them to the mayor, that's essentially, as I understand what we're doing, each of those districts with the 4 aldermen or whatever are going to nominate to the mayor some candidates. At that point, is it your expectation based on this language that each of the alderpersons is going to put in a report each of the individual scores of all those folks who've been nominated?
Just the ones to the mayor, yes.
The
And then
aggregate.
the aggregate data for everybody that applied, and I think that'll help us see if we have gaps in.
But then it says the names and scores of all recommended or nominated shall be included in the report. So that seems to suggest that those are then separated out. That's my confusion. It almost sounds like, we're identifying.
So the difference is between once people have been recommended once they've been chosen by
The mayor.
us and by the mayor, then the information the applications just for those people become public, along with all notes regarding, our decision-making process, all of that. Does that answer your question? I feel like it's not.
Yeah, I am confused. So, I thought that we recommended each one of these districts, the wards within those districts, would recommend to the mayor these names of people. The mayor then looks at these, sends them down for us to confirm,
Correct.
right? So, and those are essentially nominations so there's recommendations from us to the mayor, nominations from the mayor down to us.
Correct.
And confirmation going through the the Public Safety Committee.
Yes.
And the full Board of Aldermen
Yes.
for confirmation. So, but this sentence says the names and scores of all recommended, those that we send up to the mayor, or nominated, shall be included in the report. And it's not altogether clear to me that whether we're aggregating those or separating those out. What you're telling me is that this means that we're only going to make public those who are successful, their specific scores.
So recommended,
We recommend each
yes,
of
so
the-
anyone we recommend
Right.
and anyone that's then nominated,
Right.
those are the ones that become public. Everything else, if they weren't recommended by us or nominated by the mayor, then that just goes into aggregate data.
I know, but there may be a big pool of the recommended.
Okay,
And all of those scores, it suggests to me, have to be set out separately in addition to the aggregate data. But the aggregate data also said that the scores achieved on the qualifications rubric were aggregated. So there seems to be a conflict to me.
okay,
So if what you're saying is, we're going to aggregate the general demographic information that you have, such as age, race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and so forth, and that we're just going to take the scores of those who are nominated by the mayor. That might be another thing, because that should be a smaller pool of people. I'm just
Correct.
thinking, we as aldermen may have, this is going to be a lot of stuff for us to put together anyway, but we might rely on the mayor's office in part to do some of this. And I'm assuming the rubric is going to have to ask these demographical questions.
right.
Since it's not a job, I guess we can do that. But some of those questions you're not always allowed to ask.
Right. And I think a lot of that is yet to be determined. What is the application that we're going to set forth? We don't have that yet. What is the the exact rubric we're going to use to evaluate those applications. We don't
But you're
have that
You're
yet.
setting forth, and I appreciate the fact we're trying to get a diverse group of folks here. And so somehow we're going to have to ask them these questions
Mm-hmm.
to find out aggregate data about the demographics of the folks that we're putting on here.
Right,
And so we're just aggregating that information.
correct.
But it does suggest we're going to ask it.
Yes. And I think we need to ask it, and I think the reason we need to ask it is because if we move forward and we look at that aggregate data and we find that, 80% of the people who have applied are Caucasian with incomes over $75,000 a year, then we're doing something wrong in our process for selection and for getting out the information that this opportunity exists, and that'll help us in the future, change whatever mechanisms we use to get the word out to make sure we
Last
are.
sentence should be the names and scores of all nominated applicants should be included.
Yes, so we could take out all recommended and just have nominated.
I don't know if that satisfies anybody else.
Okay.
Thank you, that's it.
Alderman Boyd.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just kind of concerned about if we can legally ask certain questions that may be protected classes as far as race, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion. I don't know if we can legally ask some of those questions. People certainly can volunteer and ask it, but I don't know if we should be asking those type of questions.
I think we can ask, I don't think we can compel people to give that information.
But if they don't, then they may feel like it's going to exclude them for the process, possibly. You think that's an unintended consequence of wanting to gather good data?
Right. I mean, most jobs that you apply for nowadays, at the end of it, they have an equal opportunity employment survey that says that you may answer these questions for demographic purposes, but you do not need to. And
Okay, thank you.
I just think it will give us valuable information moving forward.
Okay, were there any other questions or comments? I think what I'm hearing is that a number of aldermen are appreciating what you're trying to get at, but just have questions around maybe some ways it could be improved also. So we can continue, we can call for this for a vote, or you can, would you like for us to, we can entertain a motion if you want to go that far.
Let's go ahead, and if it passes, it passes.
Okay.
If it doesn't, it doesn't.
So any other discussion or questions on amendment number 12? If not, we can entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion, so we get a vote.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 12. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion? Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Bosley, Alderman Schmidt. Alderman Boyd.
No.
Vice Chairman French.
No.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Yes.
Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard.
No.
Alderman Carter.
No.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
No.
Alderwoman Green.
Yes.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
4 aye votes, 5 no votes. Amendment number 12 fails.
Okay, thank you. Did you have another? Your first, the second amendment was dependent upon this
Yeah,
first.
it was
Okay, so
dependent upon that.
I believe we have one from Alderman Boyd. With the numbers on it. Okay, what was being passed now is amendment number 13. I believe we all have a copy. Alderman Boyd.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Amendment number 13 basically complements something that the Alderman from the 21st was hoping to do in the substitute. And what I'm doing is on page 6, line 8, after suspended execution and imposition of sentences, I would like to add a G. Yes. I'd like to add a G that says, must be a registered voter at least 1 year in the district where he or she resides.
Okay. Any questions? Alderman Boyd? Any comments?
I think it's not bad. Okay, so let me just make sure where this is being added. So this is added to the qualification subsection. G, must be a registered voter at least 1 year in the district where she resides.
Page 6.
So
Okay.
when we discuss possible changes in the form of the committee substitute that we're considering, it said that it must be a registered voter. Now, adding the other language of in the district where he or she resides, that would mean that somebody couldn't, although they could be a registered voter in the city of St. Louis, they could not have moved to that area within the last 12 months and then be nominated. Do you think that'd be a problem?
I don't see it being a problem. I mean, if you want to be alderman or any elected official, you have to live in your district for at least a year before you can register to file for office.
Okay. No other questions?
Any other comments or questions on Alderman Schmidt?
Just technically, I guess, in order to be consistent with all of it, it says the individual must be a registered voter at least 1 year in the district where she resides, I guess. Technical thing.
What do you mean?
Starting it out by saying the...
Yeah, it should, the individual.
Oh, individual must be.
Right.
Yeah, I guess everything else, that would be in line with everything else that starts off the individual. I support that. If the
So it would
committee
read,
allows.
the individual must be a registered.
Right.
Alderman Carter?
Yes, so you're just trying to stop people from not getting, folks that don't get chose, like in our district, from moving from our district to another one just to get on the board?
I couldn't see it being that serious.
On an unpaid board, all right.
You're right, not to volunteer. I wouldn't move just to volunteer to be on the board.
Thank
But
you.
I would just think it speaks to their commitment to that community. I mean, you would want somebody to actually live there and understand that community for at least a year or so before you would nominate them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Alderman French?
So this brings up an interesting thing, and I don't know if it's referred to anywhere else. What if the person is nominated to the board, gets on the board, and then over the course of their term moves? Though they stay in the city, they move to another area.
I think in the bill it says you have to live in that district, don't it?
Does it say that you have to
So
live
if they
there
move out the
throughout
district,
the
then it would
term,
disqualify
or just to be
them.
nominated?
It does say you have to live in the district.
Does it? All right, let me read this.
There should be one who resides. It says COB districts, there should be one COB member who resides in each of the 7 districts.
You have to live in
So you have to live in it. Shall.
And so if they were to move, they could not be on the COB anymore, at least from that district.
Well, that raises an interesting question, and I've somewhat lived some of this. So when we go down to 3 police districts as opposed to 6, and they were put in based on being in the 6th district, what happens?
Mm-hmm.
As long as they stay in the, do they then go in the 3rd one? But that's a question for another day.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an issue down the road.
Sure. Okay, any other questions or comments on amendment number 13? Seeing none, we can entertain a motion for amendment number 13.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded. Oh,
I have one more question.
well, let's finish this part here. Let me finish. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 13. Discussion on the motion.
Okay, so currently the age limit to serve on this is 18. So an 18-year-old, somebody who just turned 18, would not have been a registered voter for a full year.
Well, they couldn't also, if you have to be 25 and you have to live in a district, I mean, you just have to meet certain criteria. I don't think we can actually allow for and plan for everything.
Yeah, but my point, though, is that, well, really, yeah, by definition, no 18-year-old will have been a registered voter for a full year. So it's like de facto raising the age limit. And so when I proposed it before, it also proposed raising the age limit to 25. But I think it's a problem to have an 18 age limit and having the requirement to be a registered voter for a year in the same thing. Just something to think about.
I wouldn't anticipate it being a problem. It could be, but it would probably be so remote.
Okay, well, we have the motion, and it's been seconded.
What's your page? Right away is my page, bro.
I want to vote for the amendment, please.
Okay, then. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 13.
We got the same
Yes, sir?
page.
Okay, then. There's no request for previous rolls, so Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
No.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Carter. No. Alderwoman Gracia.
No.
Alderwoman Green.
No.
Chairman Kennedy.
Where you at?
You already changed it.
No.
4 yes votes, 5 no votes. Amendment number 13 fails.
Okay.
Alderwoman Hubbard has one.
Chief, Alderwoman Hubbard, you have one? Okay, then. Yes. This will be amendment number 14 that's coming out to us now.
9 minutes, Alderman Kennedy.
Say it again? Yeah, you need to switch, you can switch it now. He's going to switch the tape. I'll call you in a moment once he has the tape.
So if you go on probation, and it's just
We in? Ready? Okay, then. We have it before us, Alderwoman Hubbard. Amendment 14.
Basically, what amendment number 14 does is just, it strikes out the word imposition of sentence on, beginning on page 6, line 8. And we had some discussion about that earlier. Due to the fact that a SIS, a suspended imposition of sentence, is not technically a conviction, I just feel that it shouldn't be added in, whereas the suspended execution of sentence, which is something that would stay on a person's record if they actually were convicted of it. And I just don't feel we should use that as a means to disqualify someone when technically after they've completed their sentence, it's wiped from their record.
Any questions on amendment number 14? If not, we can entertain a motion for amendment number 14. We had a question?
So moved.
You can make a move. Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 14. Any discussion on the motion?
One thing, is that the only place where it says it? It might be someplace else, do we know?
I'm not sure.
If
I
it
just
is,
looked at it under the qualification section.
I don't know if it is either, but I just,
Okay.
so it defines, probably defines a conviction there, and so thereafter to just say conviction. Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Alderman French?
Yeah, and I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, I think, again, all that's going to work itself out during the nomination and the confirmation process.
Okay.
Under the rubric.
The rubric, that's right.
Any other discussion on amendment number 14? If not, we can, no request for previous roll. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro.
No.
Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Carter.
Aye.
Alderwoman Gracia.
No.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
7 aye votes, 2 no votes, amendment number 14 passes.
Okay. Are there any other amendments? If not, we can entertain a motion for adoption. This would be committee sub.
All right, so after 3 hearings, many hours, 14, well, I guess 13 technically amendments passed, we now have a final version of the bill. I don't think it is substantially different from the previous version of Board Bill 208. I would have liked to have seen subpoena power added. Did not seem that there's the support at the board to do that. And so with that, I move that we pass this compromise, Board Bill 208, committee substitute.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt committee substitute for Board Bill 208 with a do-pass recommendation. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah,
Yes. Alderman Vaccaro.
I just want to explain, I still think that for some people, this thing's not going to go near far enough, and I still question if it isn't just going to land in court. So, I'm just explaining why I probably can't support it,
Okay.
but I'll wait to see how it comes out and what floor substitutes come out.
All right. Any other discussions or comments from members of the committee? Alderman Schmidt?
Yeah, I guess I just wonder, Alderman, if you had any thoughts about, because we tried to put some of the things in that Mr. Brunschrager was talking about in terms of these issues. It doesn't have the subpoena power. It still does have the monitoring on what he claims could be considered a roving commission, but not clearly that, based on the fact that our city councilor, who we've indicated should be part of these things. I'm just wondering if you have something that you think we might amend this to avoid the legal disabilities that you think are still here.
Not really. I mean, like I said, I just don't believe that the people that wanted subpoena power are going to be at all happy. I think there was a lot of compromise in this. I'm just explaining why today I won't be able to vote with it, but
Okay.
I certainly want to see what comes out on the floor. I would like to make sure whatever the bill that comes out, I'm sure it's going to pass out of here today, but I just want to make sure whatever the final version of this is enacted. And I do think there was a lot of great compromise today. I don't think that's the issue. I certainly figure I'd like to hear from everybody on both sides, before I make a final vote, which, we'll do on the floor. But I'm just explaining where I'm at today on this.
So you're not offering anything that you think would cure any of those legal disabilities?
No, I'd like to really talk to, and anybody's welcome to call me or talk to me on both sides. I just want to make sure that if this, and this seems to be a pretty mild version of anything, that this is going to be something that, as we pass it, isn't just going to start, more issues on either side. Again, the people that felt that the original bill didn't go far enough, this one even goes less far than the original bill. And those that felt that the bill went too far, I'm sure, I just want to make sure that when I do make a final vote, today's just a vote whether to pass it out of committee or not. But before I actually make that final vote on the floor, I just want to be a little better informed, and I'm just explaining my vote.
And perhaps to allay some of your fears, we heard from Jamala Rogers as a representative of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression that basically they were okay with 208 as it was, so perhaps that helps them. Anyway, but thank you for that. I thought there might be some major concerns.
No. I think overall that there was a lot of great concessions. I think that I wouldn't mind hearing from both sides on it still. There's a couple days. Everybody knows how to get a hold of me, and I'd like to hear from both sides on it to see, before I make a final vote. And I'm just talking about my vote today.
I forgot to mention something. Amendment number 7 was withdrawn.
Yes.
That was, yeah, that was withdrawn. Alderman Carter, you had something?
Well, no, it just seems like, it seemed to me that Joe, that Aldo, huh? I'm sorry, that the alderman from the which ward? 23rd ward. Sorry, I don't mean no disrespect at all. That you didn't think that the bill went far enough, right? Or am I wrong?
No, both. I would think that the coalition that was here, and I think Alderman French would agree that this bill doesn't go far enough. I also believe that if the police association people are here, or the attorney, they would feel it goes too far. And I just like to get more input, and certainly open it up to hopefully people call me and I get a little bit of input over the next day. That's all I'm saying. I'm just talking about my vote today.
If there's no other discussion,
Well, I could-
I'm sorry, you have more?
Well, I mean,
Okay.
I would ask Alderman French, do you feel it goes far enough?
Do I feel it goes far enough? I think, yeah, obviously I do not. I mean, I wish it went further. And if I'm being recognized to close,
Yeah, I was recognizing you to close.
yeah. You know, so obviously I'd like to see it go further. But, you know, to those folks who are longtime activists and those folks who are new activists who fought for the last 6 months to get some kind of change, I would just tell them that, you know, this isn't over. This is the first step. This creates the Civilian Oversight Board in the City of St. Louis law. And there will be continuing efforts to strengthen this body over the months and years to come. But elections matter, and unfortunately, there just aren't the votes today to get a stronger bill, and the mayor's threat of a veto greatly influences our ability to strengthen this bill even further. And ultimately, if there was a court fight, it would be up to the city councilor, who works for the mayor, to defend the bill. And if they've come out publicly, which they've had over the last few days, and said that they flatly do not believe or want or support the idea of Civilian Oversight Board having subpoena power, it is unlikely that we would win that fight in court if our attorney doesn't want us to have it. So, so this is step one, and I would encourage people not to be discouraged and to continue fighting.
Okay. With that, we will call for the vote. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Vice Chairman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Carter. Alderman Gracia.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
8 aye votes, 1 no vote. Board Bill 208 Committee Substitute comes out with a due pass recommendation.
By your vote, we have adopted Board Bill 208 Committee Substitute with a due pass recommendation. That completes our agenda for today. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.